You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography.
Episode 45, Is Wildlife Photography Becoming Too Staged? Welcome, everybody, to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. Rob, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm doing really well, but I've been suffering with a cold that just won't go away for the last, best part of 2 weeks now. So I'm coming, hopefully it's the tail end of it. But apart from that, I'm doing really good. How's it been going with you?
It's been going well. You know, I haven't been doing much shooting with the camera, but I have been busy from a photography standpoint. I've been putting together some talks and briefings. I recently spoke to a camera club in Atlanta last week on photography competitions, how to get photos ready for contests, what to think of, and so forth. Essentially, it was a good wrap up of what we talked about way back. I was looking on episode 4 when we talked about wildlife photography competitions. And I have another chat with another camera group this upcoming week on using space in wildlife photography. And come June, I'm working on a presentation for the Journal of Wildlife Photography, and it's going to be really interesting. And I'm going to put some photos together between now and then, and it's going to talk about really how to capture a scene, take a scene in, and get all different perspectives into it. So I think what I'll do is I'll take like a cell phone image of just a scene, just a general landscape scene, and then zoom in and show images of, portraits, environmental portraits, maybe some motion blur stuff, and just kind of teach the audience that walking into a given scene, all the different possibilities that you can walk into, right? And I think it's going to be called Shooting Like a Pro. And they're working on some of the marketing material for it, and that's going to be in June. So I'm excited about that. So I've just been busy really doing talks and getting things together from a teaching perspective. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's really good actually when you can do things like that, isn't it? And sort of open people's minds as to how to look at, what you have in front of you and how you can interpret those, those elements and start coming up with ideas. And it's always, I think shooting with other people really helps you with that as well, and your own progression with it. But I that kind of almost leads us into the subject that we're going to talk about today. In a way, it's quite a good segue into that, really.
Yeah.
In the fact that, wildlife photography, I feel, to a certain degree, and we wanted to do something, controversial. I think we wanted to pick a controversial topic for today's discussion, and this is something that's been certainly playing on my mind more and more. Is that a lot of the photography that I'm seeing comes from a place of control, almost, where the situation is controlled to a degree. The situation, or a lot of the images I'm seeing, are coming from the same sort of place. They're coming from, both in terms of geographical location and also, the thought processes behind the actual shot itself. There's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on people to produce images that they've seen before, or sort of emulate things that they've seen before, styles, species, setups, that sort of thing. And so where's the authenticity now in wildlife photography? Where's the originality? And I think that is really what we wanted to expand upon today, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The more images you look at, especially on social media, and we all look at social media, and social media, at least from my perspective, keeps me up to date in terms of what's going on in the wildlife photography community. And over time, I think expectations, competition, it's led people to go above and beyond to try to control scenes, to create images that they feel are top notch in order to get them recognized either in the algorithm or in contests or other types of venues. And I think it's starting, I think versus how it was been or how it was years ago, it's starting to take over in terms of these staged environments, and it's becoming more and more common. So I think it's a great topic. I look forward to getting into it
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. And actually, if you take yourself back, I mean, I wrote an article about a couple of months ago about the sort of last 40 years of photography and how things have changed. And when you take yourself back 40 years, uh, and you look at how people would stage a photograph, it's more from a perspective of they needed to and be able to anticipate the behavior with a lot more certainty than perhaps you do today, because they didn't have the digital technology. They were working with film. They were working with all the constraints that provided in terms of, you didn't have that many shots in one go before you had to change the film. You didn't, the frame rates weren't there. The autofocus systems weren't there. All this sort of stuff. They're working with the constraints of the technology at the time. So therefore, to have something more predictable, or a situation that was more predictable, is an obvious advantage. So they would work around nests, or they would work around colonies of birds where they knew they were going to be present, or they could predict that behavior to a degree. I think now, with all the technology that we've got, there is no need, in my view, to be so controlled. And there are a lot more photographers out there doing this sort of thing than there were 40 years ago.
Yeah.
When you look at the numbers, I mean, I don't know the statistics, but you can hazard a guess that the multiples of people that are out there taking photographs of birds, let's say, using them as an example, as opposed to 40 years ago. I mean, it's well, 10, 15, 20 times more at least, I would think.
Absolutely. And I feel like each year, even by the month, I feel like there's more and more people out there taking photographs. Most of the people I meet in the field these days, Rob, and this is local, mostly on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, I'll speak to them. And how long have you been photographing? Oh, a year, 2 years, So there's a lot of newcomers, and that's a great thing. But at the same time, it changes the dynamic of what we're seeing, and there's just more voices, and that's great. But sometimes it's good to start new trends, better trends, and get away from some of these things that we're seeing, in my opinion.
Exactly.
You look at fashion photography, food photography, studio photography, portraiture, and all that. These are all types of photography that are very controlled. Whether it's lighting, just the entire situation is pretty much controlled, and it's acceptable. Wildlife photography is one of those things which is the exception to the rule, where there's still, I think, a strong desire, almost like a fundamentalist approach when it comes to even post-processing, but most importantly, capturing natural behavior as you see it, and kind of trying to make order out of chaos in a frame, right? And that's, while there's still a strong community out there that advocates for that, there's also a lot more of these staged events that are taking place, and it's happening more and more. I would argue as well that when you're trying to stage a scene and you're trying to completely control the environment for an animal photograph, it's not as enjoyable. I've done both, frankly, right? And I've done it in situations where it's a macro setup, or if I'm out in the field and I'm, in a hide, but it's just not as enjoyable as just watching the natural behavior and capturing something that happened in front of me that I was not in control of. I was a bystander to the process, and I was able to document it. I still think that's a better feeling.
Do you think that my feeling is certainly this way, that social media is funneling people down a certain route? And if you're just coming into wildlife photography and you're seeing some of these amazing shots, a lot of which are as a result of a staged situation, then the expectation is to reproduce what you've already seen. And so to that degree, you're going to be asking the questions: where was this taken? How was it done? Blah, blah, and then you're going to copy it. And I
it
think
introduces control.
It's a self-perpetuating situation, which I personally feel is very unhealthy.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree.
I mean, for me, wildlife photography is I enjoy the unpredictability of just visiting a location or searching for a certain species or whatever it might be, and just literally making the most of the situation as it unfolds in front of me. I love the unpredictability of that. And that, I think, also grows you as a photographer because it grows your experience. And if you can look at things and you start looking at things, situations in different ways, I think that's what it does. You start thinking, what can I do? If you've been to a location multiple times, for instance, which I like to do, I mean, I like to work the local patch, and you've taken similar shots of the same species over and over again, that gets me thinking, how can I do this differently? How can I use a different lens? Can I approach it in a different way? Can I approach it from a different angle of view even? Can I do it with slow shutter? Can I do it, high key, low key? Can I use a combination of those things? Can I do it at a different time of day, let's say? Can I do it in different weather conditions? All these sorts of things. How can I do something differently? I think that, for me, and the unpredictability of whatever you might come across, that, I mean, that's what grabs my interest and keeps me coming back for more, rather than wanting to go into a situation where I know roughly what to expect. So I'll sit in a hide waiting for a kingfisher to land on a perch.
Yeah.
So I go for that, standard portrait perch shot, comes in, lands on the perch, snap, 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 snap. It's,
Yeah.
what what your composition is, what your exposure is, what to expect. I mean, I kind of find that boring.
I agree. And you'll post that image on social media and there'll be 50 to 100 more images that look just like it. I mean, hummingbirds are a good example too of that, Rob.
Yeah, great example,
I
yeah.
I recently cut back my pollinator garden. I try to let everything stay over winter for, insects and so forth. So as things are starting to pop out now, I cut everything back. But I've got honeysuckle coming out now. Pretty soon I have salvia, and we have ruby-throated hummingbirds, and they'll come in and they love to feed off of these things. I'm going to set up with my blind, be ready in case they come in, and just take natural natural images of these birds as they come in, versus going down to some lodge in the Andes where there's all these feeders set up of sugar water. They put it in a banana flower and they have all the flashes set up. The whole scene is completely controlled. You're luring in the bird. Nothing wrong with hummingbird feeders, but just the actual scene itself, everything about it is a studio shot and it's staged, versus setting up in my garden, growing pollinator plants and documenting and taking pictures of these hummingbirds coming in and just behaving naturally. It's a completely different feeling.
Well, you say there's nothing wrong with feeders. There are studies to show that in those situations where they are, because these feeders are filled with sugar water rather than naturally occurring nectar from plants. And hummingbirds are obviously a part of the pollination process in those areas. So if you are substituting the natural nectar of a plant and you are feeding them a sugar water, then that means that they are going to visit fewer plants.
Oh,
and
interesting.
and there is an effect on the pollination rates, and so there is an impact there. And these are one of the things that people don't necessarily think about in those situations, because they've seen the images. They want to control that situation. They just want to plug in their camera and get the shot, rather than to take your example, in your own garden, create your own pollinator garden and just photograph what actually happens naturally. You're controlling a situation to almost guarantee an end result, as opposed to, no, I'm just going to see what I get, and I'm looking at the natural behavior. If I don't get a shot, I don't get a shot.
Yeah. It's harder and it's not going to happen as often. You can't guarantee it, but it's much more pleasing, in my opinion. You just, because I'm not on a time clock, I'm not on a photo tour, and I'm not trying to guarantee results. But it's a different mindset. Again, I think it goes back to, in that situation, at least with the hummingbirds, it gets back to trying to control an entire situation to get a shot. And that's what you're thinking about, versus just sitting back and enjoying nature and seeing what's going to happen in front of you. Two different experiences. And if you're trying to control a situation, that increases anxiety, stress, expectations. And how enjoyable is that after all, when you think about it? Not so much. And I've been through both situations
Yeah.
plenty of times over the years. But
I think expectations. That's the key word out of what you said. I think
yeah,
it's people's expectations, and particularly if you are, if you had a situation where people have paid money and they're expecting certain things, then obviously there is a temptation to then want to control that situation and provide people with what they've paid their money, to
yeah,
get. And I think we need to start questioning that.
yeah, yeah.
And we need to start questioning what actually the impact of those practices are on the things that we're photographing primarily. I think that's the major consideration, but also on people's general mindset when they come into wildlife photography and in terms of their expectation.
Yeah.
And because I would argue we're getting to the point in some situations where you're not photographing true wildlife behavior. You're photographing something that you're photographing an expectation
That's right.
has been generated from what has gone on before. So they want the pretty hummingbird in this example that we're using. They want the perfect hummingbird shot. They want that in their portfolio, and they'll do anything to get it, and it doesn't really matter. Versus, actually, I would much rather take what I can get naturally, and if it's not as polished and as professional in inverted commas looking, it's not as good. And I would argue the complete opposite to that.
Yeah. I think it's much stronger to show an image that you're proud of. And frankly, a good image, it should always be a good image, right? I mean, it's incumbent upon us as photographers to take strong images, but it seems so much more meaningful when you show an image and you say, this is what I was able to experience and this is what I was able to come across in nature, versus this is what I paid for. Here you go. I traveled to X location and I paid for this and it was set up. It doesn't have the same, it just doesn't ring as true, and it doesn't have the same meaning.
And how many photographs do we see in competitions that are that? I mean, it's like a canned tourist, isn't it? I mean, that's what I would liken it to. And I know this is going to sound controversial, but I really do feel that. I feel that if you're in a situation where basically you're plugging your camera into a setup that somebody else has designed for you and created for you and is controlling that environment, how much of that is actually your own work?
Yeah.
Very little. All you're doing is pressing the shutter. Anybody can sort their settings out, the correct settings out, to take a shot when they know what to expect.
Yes.
So if you're expecting a flash setup of a hummingbird, you know the settings on the camera. Or if you don't know, the person that set up that hide situation is going to tell you.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you don't get a shot, then there's something wrong. I mean, it's how much skill is involved in that from the photographer's side?
Yeah, not much.
Not much. And how are you going to grow as a photographer if that's all you do? And I would give you another example of certain hides in Eastern Europe, let's say, that we've seen consistently in competitions, and we've seen the same shots from pools where the birds are fed, from flash systems, from backlit flash situations at night, for example. I mean, they're amazing shots when you first see them, but then you see them again and again and again with different photographers, with the same birds, probably the same individual birds, doing the same things. And every shot is slightly different when you're doing things like that. Of course it is, but actually it's a variation on a theme. How much of that is your own work? You've done nothing other than pay your money, sit in a hide, plug your camera in, be told what settings to use, and shoot, when the situation occurs to shoot.
And I've done it myself. I've gone to different hides and spent multiple days in hides to see things, and I've come away with great images that I'm like, okay, I'll put them on social media. In some cases, I've even made prints over the years, but I didn't walk away feeling fulfilled, right? And it's just not something I would do. I went, I've experienced it and I've done it. And I've spoken to a lot of photographers about this, and it's interesting. And I'll ask them and I'll say, well, why is that so important for you to travel to this location and pay X amount of dollars to get these shots that everyone else has got? And the common reason that they tell me, and it's up to them certainly, it's they don't have those images in their portfolios. So they look at it more from a collecting standpoint. I want to get an image of the snow leopard over here, and I want to get a hummingbird down in South America, and I guess that's fine. Me personally, I don't get enjoyment out of that these days. I just don't think it's as important as, to me, wildlife photography is about capturing the beauty of nature, storytelling, experience. It's not about collecting. And I realize us as humans, that's maybe part of our species and what we like to do. A lot of people like to collect things, whether it's vintage vinyl or it's anything, right? But I just don't think collecting photographs and collecting things, I just don't think it's the right approach to wildlife photography. And that's my opinion, certainly. That shouldn't be the hard, fast rule. But a lot of people want to collect.
Yeah. Well, that was a point I was going to make, actually. When you said about the portfolio, it's exactly that. They want the shot for the portfolio, and it's like,
Yep.
okay, I want to tick this box. So I'm going to pay my money, and I'm going to tick the kingfisher box. I'm going to tick the hummingbird box. I'm going to tick the vulture box. I'm going to whatever it might be, because I want those shots, because everybody else has got those shots. They all do well on social media. Can I call myself a wildlife photographer if I haven't got those shots? I can tell you now, I haven't got a perched kingfisher shot. I haven't got one in my portfolio, because I've never paid my money to go and sit in a hide, because it's that's, for me, that's for other people. That's fine. I would much rather, and this is what's allowed me to develop more as a wildlife photographer, is row my own boat and just take each situation as it comes, learn from the mistakes that I make along the way. And every shoot for me is like even now is an education. I always want to learn something from it. I mean, I spent a good few days shooting urban birds, city birds recently, and had an absolute blast doing it, and using and learning about how I could use street lights at night and this sort of thing to good effect, and looking at street photography and trying to take inspiration from how street photographers use those sort of harsh lighting conditions you get in cities sometimes to good advantage, using shape and form, and it was just so much fun. It was just so much fun. I learned such a lot, and a lot of those images I've just binned, but not before I've learned something from them, because it's okay, well, that didn't work, but had I done something slightly differently, and my approach actually would be different, I think, when, because I want to go and do it again, and my approach in certain situations is going to be different. I'm going to be actively looking for certain things next time around that I perhaps shied away from a little bit and experimented not as much as I should have done. So everything is a learning experience, and those experiences in urban situations, I think I can take and I can use elsewhere. And I know my photography is certainly going down this road of, there's more storytelling going on here. Again, it could be we talked about shooting wider in the frame again. I've been doing a lot of that recently, and I've shown you a couple of things before we actually started recording. When I've taken a leaf out of your book, and tried to use those sort of wider environments and tried to use shapes and those sort of compositional elements, and looking for the perfect moment for another bird flying into a roosting flock, that sort of thing, with some nice shapes of trees, for example, and using those textures. That's the sort of thing that is driving my photography. Every situation is unique, so I'm not going back to the perch kingfisher shot from the hide that using and the same damn perch that you recognize time and time again. I mean, this is the level it's got to. You recognize not only the birds but damn perches they're flying to.
You know, you talk about urban wildlife photography, Rob. What's so interesting about it is it's quite ironic, right? If you look at it, because the entire landscape is manipulated, right? Talk
Yeah,
about stage. I mean, a city, it's urban planning. Everything is manipulated based on our species. However, wildlife images in urban environments feel the most candid to me when you look at things. They're
there's a
really
nice
not
irony to
staged.
that, isn't there? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. It's and I'm just thinking about this as we're talking about it. I've rarely will I see an urban wildlife image that feels staged. It always feels candid, whether it's a peregrine falcon on a bridge, you know, nesting, or pigeons, rock doves in front of graffiti, or you know, all these different things. The images you were showing me with the gulls, it has a candid feel to it, and it feels in some cases gritty, documentarian. Rarely do I look at an urban wildlife shot and I say, "Oh yeah, that looks really staged." It just doesn't. So it's very ironic when you think about it.
And the other thing I like about that sort of photography is that there is a certain element of you can move away from the technical perfection,
Yeah,
and there's more of an emphasis. So there's less of an emphasis on technical perfection, more of an emphasis on shape, form, light,
graphics even. Yeah,
graphics, atmosphere. I think
yeah,
it all creates an atmosphere and a story. So, okay, there might be, somebody could pick apart an image technically and go, "Oh, that's not quite sharp there," but that doesn't matter.
no,
To me, the technical elements in that respect don't matter. Whereas if you've got a perched kingfisher, for example, which we've seen millions of examples of, if
silky
it's not
smooth
technically
background.
perfect, then of course it's flawed and people are going to see it as flawed. But I actually like the flaws in some of these other images, these sort of urban things, or the wider in the frame stuff, or the more candid style imagery. I like the flaws in it because actually
Yeah,
that gives photography personality. And,
I
and
agree.
actually, I think this is what's lacking. Thinking about this was we're talking out loud, is I think what those stage situations do is they take the personality out
Yes,
of
it's
the
artificial.
subjects because it's artificial.
Yes, when you see a spider silhouetted with multiple little loom cubes on a perfect mushroom and the whole I mean, it looks nice, but you can these days you could just tell AI to generate an image like that. Frankly, it's artificial and it's cold. It has a sterile feeling to it. I completely agree. You know, it's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was editing a picture of a bird. I can't remember what it was. It might have been a common yellowthroat. It was a songbird of some sort, and I was zooming in to clone out. There was a small tick near the eye. And I'm like, why am I doing this? That's there. It's part of, and I'm like, the bird does not have to be perfect. And I let it go, and that's even my style has changed over time. I mean, just by default, you want to clean things up and make everything look as perfect as possible. But you're not in a studio, right? I'm not photographing a common yellowthroat in a studio to put in a catalog or a magazine. It's not fashion or portrait type photography. And it's important to introduce those elements to make it real. It doesn't,
Otherwise,
not everything has to be gritty, but there
otherwise
needs to
life
be.
becomes homogenized, doesn't it? Like
Yes,
it's
yes,
it's like it's like walking into a city center where you could walk into, it could be any city center in any part of the country and probably any part of the world these days, because it has the same stores.
yeah,
It just looks and feels the same because it's designed, you know, uh, to extract money from
yeah,
shoppers. So actually, and these people, these companies, these designers, they all want us to feel comfortable and they want us to feel familiar. And I think that's the same with photography for a lot of people. They want to feel comfortable and familiar with a situation, um, that they've seen time and time again and want for their portfolio. So there's an element of comfort to that. I said it's like walking into that city center and knowing what shops you're going to find, and what to expect. It's that you know what to expect.
yeah.
And for me, I like to know. I don't like to know what to expect. I want the unexpected because
Yes.
that is what holds my interest.
Yeah, and there's this big thing. I really I've never done it before. I don't even know if I've known somebody who has done it, but these animal game farms, that's another thing that's popped up. And, it's interesting. You were talking about like technological improvements at the beginning when we started talking on, cameras and so forth. I mean, getting a bird in flight shot or that action shot, that was a big deal years ago before AI tracking on your camera. You had one or two focus points that you had to anticipate and hold the trigger down and spray and pray. I mean, the more and more that you can capture now and the easier it is, expectations are getting higher and higher for unique shots. And I know people will pay money and they'll go to these game farms, if you will. And there's well, they're not wild, but there's wolves and all these different things and bears, and people will get these shots. And again, talk about a staged environment, right? When you're going into basically a petting zoo. And from what I understand, a lot of these animals are just treated terribly, right? I mean, there's all kinds of ethical concerns and, whatnot. And I know it's a controversial topic, especially here in the United States, but that's the ultimate stage setup. And you're talking megafauna at this point. You're talking large mammals, and it goes beyond just, insects and moving, putting the fly in the refrigerator or moving the spider on top of them. It's a whole different level, actually.
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
I think it's quite despicable too.
It's a shortcut. People want shortcuts, and this is probably what we're talking about, actually, isn't it? It's if you pay, just simply pay money, and you visit a controlled situation, that is a shortcut.
Yeah,
to getting the type of images that you want, and the sort of images that people want. Their expectations have been shaped by what they see online.
Yeah.
And it's simply that. So the more of this stuff that we keep dishing up, the more people are going to want to replicate it, and will be willing to take shortcuts to do that, because they don't want to necessarily, let's say, go to Africa or whatever. And that's a whole another discussion, isn't it? I mean, because a lot of that is set up as well.
Yeah, a lady I work with in the office, she went to Africa, and then she shared some images, and we have like a little like monitor screen. It's just like a board where people put birthdays and so forth, this nonsense. But they had these pictures when she was down in South Africa, I think it was. And she's at like, you could see her like petting a giraffe and these things. And they have a lot of these things outside of the parks now where they get these animals and they let you pet, or walk with a cheetah and a lot. It's they don't know. The people who are paying in most cases don't know. They think it's an incredible experience, but it's absolutely horrific for wildlife and what it does. I mean, it's terrible. And there just has to be more education around that. And people photograph these too. I mean, very famous photographer, English guy. He has some of these amazing black and white images he's been selling for years and years of these manicured lions, the manes. I mean, it looks like, the Wizard of Oz. the mane is so, and, and these, not one scar, they're just perfect, but they're kept lions. They bring them out and they feed them and they pose them. And it's not wildlife photography at that point, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And actually, you do want, the imperfections are what makes nature so wonderful in my view. And it's celebrating those. I said, it's this, I come back to that word again. It's it's homogenizing things, it's just, and I think that's a real shame. I think there's real beauty, in the imperfections. I mean, nature is a wonderful thing. And how can you feel that something is real if it's as perfect as we can get it? Coming back to your tick, but I agree with you. When I come across situations like that, it might be, I don't know, it might be missing feathers, or it might have a scar, or it might, in some cases, it's missing a leg.
Yeah.
I was photographing I was going through pictures that I'd taken of these urban gulls that I've been doing recently. And one, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's got one leg. I didn't even notice when I was sort of concentrating on composition and this, that, and I didn't even notice at the time. And it's like, it's got one leg. I was like, oh, yeah. And part of me wanted to discard those images. And you go, no, actually, there's an interest in that because there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
You know, there's this bird that's actually got one leg, but in this urban environment, it's managing to survive because it's nicking food from people that are eating on the, next to the water. So
there's a determination story with it,
yeah,
in a way. Yeah, I just photographed a black vulture. I think it was last fall or summer, and I didn't realize that either. It was taking off from a barn where it was roosting to go down and feed on some carcass, and I noticed it just had like a little stump. It didn't have a foot. It was gone, and I had that much more respect for the bird because of that, and that made the shot actually. Yeah, the uniqueness of it. To your point, absolutely,
exactly. And how many people would just bin those photos because it's not perfect, you know, and it's an obvious imperfection as well when you look at the image.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a stronger, we've talked about this in other related topics on the podcast, but as there's less and less wildlife, as there's more and more concern around our interactions with wildlife, photojournalism, showing stories and showing the plight of animals and being able to be real with photography has become that much more important. It doesn't cut it anymore to just have a pretty image, right? I mean, I think we're past that. The world is moving in a not so good direction in many ways, but when it comes to these animals and their survival moving forward, I mean, we're going essentially through a mass extinction event throughout the globe. I mean, let's just be honest, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. Yeah. Unless we're all gone, frankly, as a species, and that's not going to happen, at least in the near term. So it's not enough to just have a pretty picture and stage something. We have to go beyond that.
I don't know. And I think, keeping it real is really where we're getting to, isn't it? I mean, because as you say, you can have we all need pretty pictures. Okay. That's where it starts, because people see a picture of, and we all gravitate towards something which is aesthetically pleasing. So, a beautiful bird is going to be more appealing to somebody than let's say a spider. So people are going to want to save the pretty bird more than they're going to want to save the spider. So that there is a place for those pretty pictures, but I think more and more there is a need for us to keep things real and to show what is actually happening, and documenting that, because I think people need to know. People actually don't want to know. They gravitate towards this, towards hiding away from the truth because they can't deal with it. And when you actually realize what is happening in certain situations, being it, mining companies clearing, ancient forest or whatever it might be, we need to show those things. And when you think about some of the images that stick in your mind, and the orangutan hanging from the from the logging machine or whatever it is, or the seahorse clinging onto the cotton bud, those sorts of things do stick in your mind. They're real storytelling images. How set up they were, I don't know. But they're telling a story. They're telling a story of, as you say, this sort of mass extinction event, which is, which we are, we are the perpetrators of.
Yeah.
And I can't see that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, current administrations around the world.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I'm in northeastern Pennsylvania right now, in the town where I grew up, and there's a great little bird sanctuary. It's a wetlands refuge along the Susquehanna River. It's only a few miles from where I'm at. And some years ago, they built a nuclear power plant there, right? Because they use the water from the river as it comes down. And some company from I think it's Amazon, I want to say, but in any event, some company bought up all of the land around this preserve and these wetlands, and tons and tons of money. They bought everybody out. They logged it all, Rob. It's disgusting. And it's going to be this huge, it's a data center, AI data center. And this is a big thing all throughout the United States. They're building these data centers. And I mean, they take up so much water, so much energy, and essentially these are going to feed as AI is going to get bigger and bigger, and it's destroying tons of habitat. So I could go down there and put my flash on and get a picture of a yellow warbler, for instance, because that's a great spot for them to breed, and zoom in at 600 millimeters, and it's not going to tell the true story of what's going on, right? And what's going on around it it's not good. Everything's being destroyed. It's terrible.
Yeah, and I would argue that going from a purely photography point of view and a technical point of view, and as we talked about before, those sort of type portrait images are easier to take because it's easier for people to understand because there's not too much compositionally that you need to think about. You get the technical settings right, and we can all do that in pretty much no time with the equipment that we've now got. It's an easy shot to take if you know where to go, and if you go to the right place that set it up for you, it's an easy thing to take. Whereas if you're trying to tell more of a story about the habitat for that species and how it's being impacted by X, Y, or Z, that's so much more skillful, and it's so much more difficult. How do you go about that? And if all you've ever done is been plonked in a seat and told, what settings to use, and
where's the imagination in that? You're right.
The animal's coming here, or you're going to a studio and the frog is on the flower and the flash is all set up for you and blah blah. How are you ever going to move your photography on and be able to take advantage of those or work those other situations where you actually take something meaningful and something that could make a difference?
Yeah. And compositionally, these shots are extremely superficial, to your point, because they're redundant, and you're taking an image that was staged or an image that was done by 50 other photographers. It's very shallow, and the best you'll get is a like and someone saying, oh, that's pretty, and they're going to scroll on after 2 seconds. We talk about, you use the analogy of a chocolate, right? Something hits you quickly, and it's like, oh, that's a nice image, and there's an impact, and you immediately move on. In my opinion, a more powerful photo is something that requires somebody to study it and to come back to that image again and again. And there's a little bit compositionally, there's some mystery in there, right? You're not giving everything away, and you're leaving some interpretation up to the viewer, and you're incorporating different types of compositional elements, whether it's shape, whether it's storytelling, narrative. There's all these things you can build in. Those are the images that I think are stronger because they grow on you and they make you come back, not looking at something and saying, oh, that's pretty, and then you just move on. Well, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's right.
It's got a depth to it. Rather than just a superficiality, if you like.
Yeah.
But, there's the, go back to the perch kingfisher. Oh, perch kingfisher's pretty bird, blah, blah, nice, blurred background. It's separate, all the technical things are there. Yeah, lovely. Next.
Yeah.
Whereas opposed to something that might be technically flawed, if you want to use that expression, but has more depth to it, has more impact.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, those are the images that I'm striving for, rather than the technically perfect things that everybody else is taking, because I'm not after a huge Instagram following. That's not what does it for me. I'm after being, what I want to be authentic. I want my work to look and feel authentic, and to a certain degree original. I mean, we all take ideas from other people and we work on them. So being unique in this age of oversaturated, in an oversaturated situation, being unique is more and more difficult. And are we ever truly unique? Difficult to say, but I certainly don't want to be. It's called photo bagging, isn't it? That landscape photographers do it as well. They look at locations, well-known locations, and they have it on a list and they want to tick it off. And I think it's called photo bagging. And wildlife photographers, wildlife in inverted commas, do it as well. I think they want this shot, they want that shot, they want the other shot.
Like a bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. And I go back to, situation, obviously we've talked about multiple times on the podcast, but it's quite a good example, which, a location that you and I have both been to, Noss in Shetland. And you go, and you go there on the boat, and obviously you've got the diving gannets and da 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 da, and you take the standard stuff, right? If you go and do that trip, it's too tempting not to do it, because it's just so exciting the first time you go, right? But actually, very soon after I'd filled my boots with that sort of thing, I wanted something different. So I was looking around, and I love the contrast between the gannets, white plumage, and
and those dark cliffs.
The dark cliffs. That to me was
Yeah.
fascinating, right?
Yes.
And that's what really did it for me. And I spent my time, much more time, focusing on trying to use that rather than those sort of standard diving things, because it's like, well, I'm just going to look like everybody else. And I look back at my pictures, and they just look like everybody else,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. You're right.
And to me, there's no point in doing that. I'd much rather look for a more artistic approach using other elements, because it is such an amazing place, and there are so many opportunities there beyond the diving gannet scenario.
Yeah. And when I was there a couple of years ago, we were on the boat riding around Noss, and there was one image. It was a hanging gannet where
I saw
unfortunately got strung up based on some fishing line. And of course, as you know, Rob, they use man-made materials, human-made materials, I should say, to line their nests, fishing lines, all these plastic things they get up. And this particular bird hung itself unintentionally, and it was just dead, and the other birds were picking at it, and you could see its insides and everything. That was the most powerful picture I took when I was riding around on the boat, and got the most attention because it wasn't a here's the gannet diving and here's the pretty, it was real.
Yeah. And what was interesting about that situation actually was that I know you were on the boat with Khurram.
Yeah.
Khurram Khan, and you both looked at that situation, and you both took award-winning images, didn't you? From
That's
that,
right.
but your approach was different.
That's right. Yeah.
That was the interesting thing from me, as photographers. You saw that situation slightly differently and came up with different images, both of which got awarded in competitions because they told a story
in different contests.
Because they told a story. And actually, my favorite image, funnily enough, from my experience there, was two birds fighting over a piece of fishing net. And that, and that had the, that had the, there was a possibility that they could have got caught up in that net and drowned, and they were fighting over it. And that was my favorite image for that, because for me, that told a story. There was an interest there that, what you took at that time was unique. And it wasn't a situation that you could go back and say, oh, well, I saw Josh's image of the gannet hanging on that pier. I want to go there and I want to take that picture. You can't, because that was a unique situation. And this is what I'm getting to.
Yes.
It's a great example of that. It's a great example of that. Looking for a unique image in a popular location where the primary focus for most people that would go there would be to take the shot that ticks the portfolio list.
The diving gannet,
The diving gannet.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. And I think the more and more we can get photographers to start thinking this way, I personally feel it'll be more rewarding for them. For the listeners out here, people who are listening, try this. Try to stay away from, I think you'll find it much more satisfying to take these types of images than going to something that's a redundant staged image just because you want to get it on your portfolio. If you want to do that, fine, do it. But try to expand and start doing some of these other things as well that we're talking about, because I think it's going to be much more rewarding for you.
Yeah, and it's going to teach you different techniques as well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, if you, a lot of, I don't know if you agree with me, but a lot of the stuff that is staged revolves around the more portrait style photography, where a lot of the exposure is true to how you've seen the scene, so it harks back to traditional photography methods, to create pretty portrait style images. That seems to be where it's the majority of that photography goes. So it's
Yeah.
not expanding your skill set in terms of looking at slow shutter, high key, low key, combining those elements, or coming up with your own ideas.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I going wider in the frame, for example, those sorts of things. And I think if you allow yourself to just get focused on what everybody else is doing, you're never going to expand your own skill set. And
Yeah.
I've found recently, and in the last few years, I've enjoyed my photographic journey more than any other time in my life, I think, is when I've gone to the extreme with things. So you take the high key, low key situations, for example, and you go, oh, well, I was a high key situation and I overexposed by a stop. No, no,
Hmm.
overexposed by 5, right? And see where that takes you. Underexposed by 4 or 5, stops. So the only thing you can see is the outline of a bird that's being rimlit, for example, or whatever it might be. Experiment with those things. With slow shutter is another classic example. You'll get loads of advice online about, oh yeah, go to 1/50th of a second and look, this is slow shutter. No, because you end up with images that look like you've taken things by accident because you haven't got the shutter speed correct. No, go to 1/15th, 1/8, 1/4 of a second, and see
Yeah.
what happens. You'd be amazed at what you can produce. And actually the unpredictability of it, going back to that again, is just so enjoyable, because you just, with a portrait image, if it's sat there in front of you and you're exposing correctly and everything else, which, to be honest, with the modern technology, if you can't do that now,
You're
there's
in the
something
wrong
missing upstairs,
pick up
But
checkers or backgammon. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, because the camera will do it for you. I mean, but if you are taking control of it and you're pushing these boundaries, and it's just so much more rewarding, and it will expand your mind
And I
and the
say do it with
possibilities.
like local wildlife and things that you photographed 1,000 times. I always try to tell people because they feel more comfortable doing that. I get it when you're photographing something for the first time. When I was in Kenya for the first time and I was photographing these leopards and trees with impala, and it was so amazing. The last thing I could think about at that point in time is, let me do some motion blur and play around with, just because so I get it. So I tell a lot of people, when it comes to experimenting, do it with the stuff you photograph all the time around your house. This way you'll have that comfort level and you won't have that, oh, I'm missing the shot, or I'm passing up an opportunity to get a bunch of things that may not work out. And so I get that there's always that anxiety out there. So do it with the common stuff. I mean, it doesn't really matter. When that type of photography, I think, especially motion blur, camera movement, you're going for a more abstract feel. The actual animal does not matter. It really doesn't. It could be a gull in an urban environment, or a pigeon, or what have you, a great blue heron. And you'll be more comfortable doing it as opposed to something rare. If I saw a pangolin run across, I don't know if I'd be worried about a motion blur at that point. I'm like,
No,
I gotta photograph this, right? Yeah,
you want the documentary shot, wouldn't you?
yeah, yeah. At least first, right?
It's always the same when you go somewhere new as well, isn't it? I have this fight going on in my brain when I go somewhere new, and it's always, oh, I've got to take this documentary shot of a
I have
species
to
I've
prove
never
I was
seen
here.
before, or whatever. No, no, no. And then the other side of me go, no, to hell with that. It doesn't matter. That's not creative. You're not gonna, you might flick back and look at that picture in the future and go, oh, that was nice. It's like a memory of those documentary style images, those literal images are kind of like memories for me. Whereas the artistic stuff, the more, that's more of a, I guess that's the stuff that I'm more proud of. That's the stuff that I want to go back and look at again and again and again at, because I just know that that's the thing that is expanding my skill set as a photographer.
Yeah, you were
Being
creating.
able to, being able to go into those situations and actually not being tempted into taking the documentary shot and going straight for the artistic, I think that's that's a change in mindset as well. And that's something I tried to do recently. Let's put it that way. It's just come away from somewhere, not taking or I might take a documentary approach, but I still have an artistic element in there. So it might be high key,
Yeah.
rather than sort of going ridiculously slow shutter or something like that, and coming away with nothing because I got the situation wrong. But
Yeah. I've been playing around recently with a lot of high key, low key, and also just using shapes, patterns, lines, curves, all these different types of things. And of course, just using natural elements and typically doing that through environmental portraits. I've been having a lot of fun with that, but I've got to start playing around more with motion blur. That's it's something that I'll do every so often, typically like bird fox and
I've
things.
not
But
seen a lot of your work with motion blur.
I know.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've focused on that, and I think I'm going to play around with that a lot this summer, especially with my ideas. I get a lot of green herons behind my property, great egrets, snowy egrets, and they're always hunting, right? And they hunt so fast when they're picking whether it's these little menhaden fish or whatever out of the water. I think that's a great spot for slower shutters to just get some really dynamic movement, the splashes, so I'm going to play around with that this summer. That's on my agenda.
You definitely should, because I mean, all sorts of situations that it just opens up a whole new world.
Yeah,
because as I said, keep coming back to it. It's the unpredictability of it. It's the you kind of get to know how something could turn out from any given situation, but you never quite know what you're going to get. I mean, I've seen shots, for example, shot in harsh sunlight using ICM, where the photographer has just got the outline of the bird, but the sort of rainbow colors in the outline of the bird. So in the body of the bird, by moving the camera throughout the exposure and using a high key technique. And you think, crikey, you can't line that up and actually know what you're going to get when you press the shutter. Even if you were, if you knew the elements were there to produce it, you couldn't still guarantee you could do it, because it's so unique as to how the light falls and how you move the camera and everything. And a lot of it's down to a degree of luck, but you're allowing yourself the possibility of getting that luck by experimenting. And I think all these things, it's just so, that slow shutter thing is just so interesting. But I love that. I really think that in my own photography this year, I'm going to do a lot more urban stuff, because I enjoyed that so much, and working with things that weren't afraid of you, and you could to a certain degree control that situation. Well, you can't. I mean, it is a candid style. But it's exploring another. It's exploring another skill set.
Yeah,
and because it's not like looking at something in a rural environment. It's completely different. The rules change slightly. As you say, you're looking for shapes and lines and light and all these things. Those are the compositional elements that make the shot, not necessarily the subject and its behavior. It's just placing the subject in the right area of the frame. I just think the possibilities are much greater, and you just got, I don't know, it's almost freeing when you look at those situations and allow yourself to your mind just to go to places it's not been to before.
You're truly painting with light at that point, right? I mean, that's basically what it is. It's interesting too. There's one shot I've always wanted to get with motion blur, and it was actually slow shutter and a rear curtain sync, and I wanted to have a little flash pop at the end to freeze some of it some years ago, and I screwed this up. I just didn't have the right lighting conditions. I didn't have the right equipment, but there were bighorn sheep, and they were, the males, they'll come at each other and they'll ram heads right during the and the shot that I wanted and that I envisioned, and I wish I could go back, and maybe one day I'll have this situation again where they were both coming together, and I wanted to get that blur of the
Yeah.
motion of both of them colliding, but that collision point, I wanted
You
to
want the
have
flash
the rear,
to go.
yeah, and have their heads
Shall I,
relatively
shall I
sharp.
tell you
And
how you could do that?
yeah,
I'll tell you how you could do that, right?
and tell me where I
You,
can get that photo, Rob. Let's stage it.
I don't know.
Let's stage that image so we
Somewhere
can
where there's bighorn
completely
sheep.
contradict what we just. No, just kidding.
But I reckon, well, this is talking about control, but we're talking about control in a different way. I think what you could do with that is, rather than mount the camera and have it rear curtain sync, so you're telling
Yeah,
the camera you want it to fire at the end of the exposure. If people don't understand what that means, I mean, basically what Josh is talking about is you have a longer shutter, so he's getting the blur, and then the flash pops at the end of
yeah.
the exposure. So
And the sharpness is through the flash pop, and the
yeah,
ambient light is blurred. Yeah,
right. So what you're trying to do there is that you are trying to time it so the end of the exposure comes at the point where the heads collide, and that's going to be difficult for you to do, right? And
yeah,
so there's a skill. So rather than do that, I think you need somebody to help you. Okay, and then you just say, right, all I want you to do is fire the flash manually at the point those heads collide. So as soon as
mm,
you, so they're timing the flash at the point the heads are
ah,
colliding,
that's a good
and
point.
then
Yeah,
you're just taking some slow shutter
yeah.
shots, and then hopefully you'll get it.
Yeah, because if I have it, like, maybe let's say it's a full second exposure, right? That flash is going to go off at the end of that exposure, and the timing, it would have to work out so perfectly, right, for the
You're not
heads
going to
to.
do it.
Yeah,
You're
that's a
not
good
going to do
point.
it. Stack
Yeah,
the odds in your favor.
yeah. I
And you
need
see,
somebody else there with me. I cannot be on
yeah,
my own on that. Yeah, we've got to.
but you see, this is the value also of shooting with other people, on
Yeah,
bouncing ideas off of other people, because
yeah,
they'll come up with a situation and say, I'm trying to do this, and you say, well, that's going to be
yeah.
bloody
They're
impossible
like, hey, I
because
want to
you
get
can't
that shot. I
copy
don't
it.
care. You want to get that shot? Hold this flash. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? It's like, who holds the flash?
that's right.
And
Yeah,
this is where teamwork comes in.
somebody owes somebody a beer at the end of that.
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you, actually,
Well, wouldn't that
oh,
be a great shot, Rob? Think about it. I visualized that shot in my head. It could be muskox. It could be,
oh no,
yeah.
I tell you where you could do it, right?
Mm.
And this you could almost guarantee you could get it. I reckon at the right time of the year would be, and this is again, it's a controlled situation. We're talking about parks and things like, but somewhere like Richmond Park or one of these deer parks in
Oh,
London,
with the
right?
stags.
With the stags and the ratter,
Mm.
yeah, you could
Yeah,
do that. You could do that,
yeah.
and you could have
Mm.
this slow shutter, and then somebody else firing the flash. Yeah, because when we're talking about flash, we're not talking about something that's going to put, upset the wildlife or whatever,
Yeah,
because we're talking about
yeah,
daylight situation where they're not even going to notice. I mean, they're
yeah.
too busy fighting over who's going to have the female to worry about a bit of flash. So
And you get the colliding motion, which I think is cool. Typically, when you get these motion shots, it's always motion heading in one direction. In this case, you have motion colliding,
oh
which
yeah,
I think
coming
is so
in
cool.
to each
Yeah,
other. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I've done it with swans, actually. Sounds a bit silly, but sort of swimming together. You know how they like to greet each other and they swim towards each other. Sometimes the
Mm.
heads. Anyway, I've done it with that a couple of times. With them, as you say, with the motion coming from the left and the right hand side of the frame to meet in the middle. Yeah, that's interesting. But I
If
mean,
anybody gets these shots, please give Rob and Josh credit and send us
I
the.
tell you, we ought not to discuss this on
No,
podcasts. Actually, should
yeah,
we?
right,
We should
right.
have these discussions privately, because we're giving everybody our secrets.
All right, get us a coffee. Get us a coffee.
Yeah, buy us a coffee. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
link in the description.
Oh, this is
dear.
great.
But no, you see, that is the really good thing about collaboration, I think, with other people, and this is why. And this is a completely separate topic, but and one we sort of touched on when we talked
Yeah,
about
shooting alone or shooting with
shooting
group.
with somebody else. But this is the advantage of, you don't necessarily have to shoot with other people, but actually being, having friends and people that
Yeah,
you know,
good network.
and then being a network with them and share ideas is something that actually will move your photography on, to no end, really. And it's something that I found really valuable over the last few years, is having people like you and other people that I can bounce ideas off of. And actually, when you're shooting with them out in the field as well, you can work as a team,
Yeah.
and you can pass up the opportunity of taking an image yourself to help somebody else out to get a shot. And I've done that before, and people have done it for me, and I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's this podcast itself, I've been able to help a lot of people. I've gotten messages, "Hey Josh, I was listening to this. What do you think of this image? I, was inspired by the podcast," and vice versa. I would learn from some other people too. They would even sometimes correct me. They'd say, "Hey Josh, I know you said this," but I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point." So
Yeah.
even the back and forth with the audience has been helpful, right? Even
I mean,
outside of my immediate photography network, it's been great.
well, neither of us pretend to know everything, do we? I mean,
No,
and actually, if we did, it'd be boring, wouldn't it? I mean,
this is
that's the
true.
thing about wildlife photography, and I guess where this whole discussion has emanated from is just, there's always something to learn, but if you don't open your mind to it, and you just take the photographs that everybody else is taking, or the photographs that you see on social media, the things you want to emulate, you're not going to learn as quickly.
Yeah.
And
Be the Beatles, don't be the Monkees. Be
yeah,
Van Halen, don't be Warrant or Slaughter or Skid Row, right? I mean, that's basically there's some
yeah,
musical analogies, right?
exactly. Be the yeah, be the person that gets there first, and
Yeah,
invents the wheel, rather than follows on in everybody else's footsteps. But and take inspiration from other genres of photography as well.
yeah.
I think is always good to learn from. There's always things we can learn, and I always look at portraiture and street photography and all
Street
these.
photography for urban wildlife. I mean, that's
Oh
a
yeah, it's
huge
perfect.
influence. Yeah.
It's perfect.
Landscapes for environmental portraits, of space photography incorporating animals, right? Loose compositions. I mean, minimalism. Look at fine art photography, right? I mean, there's so many different types of photography that can influence, especially in the wildlife space. There's so many
Yeah,
different
I mean,
types of
even
photography.
studio photography, food photography. Look at the lighting. It's all
Yeah,
about the lighting and making things look delicious, isn't it?
yeah.
But there are skills. There's a skill
Yeah.
set there that we can draw on. And
What makes a cheeseburger look incredible? I mean, certainly that toad is going to look even better.
yeah, right, a toad burger. Yeah.
Not to eat it, I guess. But, yeah.
Oh crikey! Oh, yeah, I'm sure somebody's thought of it. But toad burgers.
Oh.
Anyway, I guess that's probably not. Is it a good place to leave it on a toad
Yeah,
burger?
I think so.
Maybe. Oh dear, no toads were harmed in the making of this podcast. Yeah, or recording of this podcast. Anyway, yeah, a useful discussion, Josh. I always love the things that we grab that are a little bit more controversial. I like having a bit more of a spirited discussion. So,
I agree.
I hope people have enjoyed that. So, what's next for you? What you got coming up?
Boy, it's coming up on the busy season when it comes to photography. So I'm super
Yeah,
excited. I mean, things are starting to finally arrive. Spring, it's been cold here the past couple of days, but there's going to be some south wind soon, and a lot of migrants are going to start showing up, and I'll be shooting as much as I can each weekend, all throughout April, May, and then in June, I'll start kayaking and start shooting a lot of the water birds out back. So it's going to be busy, but I'm looking forward to it.
yeah. No, I guess for me, yeah, spring's well underway, and I tell you what, it's stopped raining. It stopped raining. The last couple of weeks,
Wow.
it's been pretty dry. So, that's a step forward. And of course, the daylight hours are drawing out, and today is the
That's
first
always
day of
amazing.
daylight saving time, or British summertime, as we call it. So that's that is always nice to get there, and you just that there's more daylight than darkness now, and yeah, I like that. Yeah, I guess it's sort of more of the same for me. I want to get away actually and do some seabird stuff as we get into sort of May and June. So I'm going to start looking, a week or two away to places like, I went to Anglesey last May. I think I might want to try. I want to try and go back there because that is a fantastic place. It's an island off the north coast of Wales. And then I want to get to Yorkshire as well, perhaps, over the summer months. I'd love to do the grouse, and
Mm.
also do some of the sort of seabird cliffs as well that they've got there, and maybe even go a little bit further north and try and to the Farne Islands or something like that. Skomer is on my list for
Oh
this
yeah.
year as well, really. Just try and do something different. I'd like actually to go to Skomer on a rainy day. That would be really interesting, and try and do the puffins,
Mix it up.
perhaps in
Yeah.
July. Yeah. And then, of course, we've got Bird Fair coming up.
Yeah.
So don't forget that Josh and I are going to be at Bird Fair this year. So we'll have a stand in the art marquee. So do come and say hello, because we're going to be promoting something there, which people will be interested in, I'm sure. And we're also going to be championing a conservation cause, which we're going to be raising money for, with Georgina Statler. And that is the black cockatoo, and it's a nesting box program for that. We're talking about how we're impacting, the wildlife across the planet. That's a whole thing to do with mining and whatever. I'll let Georgina explain, because she's championing that. But no, so we're going to be raising money for a nest box program for the black cockatoo in Australia this year. And this is what we want to try and do actually going forward, is every year pick a conservation cause where we can make a big difference with a small amount of money, because we're not able to raise, thousands and thousands of dollars, pounds, whatever currency you want to work in, because we just don't have that ability. But we can make a big difference with small programs where, a small amount of money going directly to the cause, can make a huge difference. And that's really where our focus is, and also bringing attention to a wider picture, talking about storytelling and everything else. And there's a real story behind that particular situation, which we'll let unfold later on down the line. But so do come and see us at Bird Fair, and there'll be a couple of little goodies and things that you can buy from us, and to help raise a bit of money for that. And also there'll be some wild art books. You remember the first year of wild art, I produced a book, some of which we still got. So if you want to pick up a copy of that, I'll be giving those away. So anybody who comes along and has a chat, come and pick up a copy of that. And that will have some real inspiration for you, photographically in that book, because there was amazing pictures in there. And a lot of those images were where people had, even if they had gone on a trip on well-known spots, they'd generally done something a little different to other people to get the shots that were awarded. And I can think of a number of examples straight off the top of my head where that happened, and we awarded originality.
Yeah. And
because I think that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? So this year is there's lots happening this year. And the announcement we're going to make, I think maybe in the next few weeks with Georgina, we've been working on something, and we've been alluding to it for a while now, but I think you're going to like it. And yeah, so look out for that. Next few weeks we'll make an announcement, and if you want to come and talk to us about it, and you're going to be at Bird Fair, then come to the stand and we can have a good chat about it. So
yeah, Bird Fair is going to be fun too. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of people that I've known over the years that I've never met in person. So it's going to be a good time. Yeah,
well, that art marquee is there are a few photographers around that art marquee that we know, and so it'll be good to get together. It's one of those events. It's such a great networking place, to meet and talk to people. I used to love it when I used to do it for for Bird Photographer of the Year, and we used to have that for those 5 years or whenever, for however long I was running it. And we'd have the awards presentation, and then we'd have the exhibition, and selling the books and everything else. And honestly, I didn't stop talking all weekend. There's a queue of people coming up, and it was just so nice to chat to everybody. And and share all those experiences. It was it was it's a fantastic place for that. So do come along and say hello if you're coming to Bird Fair. But Josh, great discussion.
Yeah, as always.
Thanks for the time, as always, and thanks everybody for listening. And don't forget to buy us a coffee if you've enjoyed the episode. Link in the description. And don't worry if you don't want to buy us a coffee. We're still mates. Just keep listening. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a rating. Leave us a review or whatever. That's all appreciated as well. So so we hope you've enjoyed the content, and we will catch you again next time.
Take care.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.